Let's bring in Meryl Cornfield, staff writer for the Washington Post. Welcome, Meryl. And I'm curious, let's get to your interpretation of that message we just played from Governor Shapiro. Is he trying to lower expectations for the vice president and then raise them for Donald Trump?
I think a lot of Democrats are concerned. I mean, obviously, after what happened with the June debate with Biden and what we saw, the aftermath of that, they're worried for what will happen with Harris. Also, this is, as you pointed out, the rules earlier, there's a debate among Democrats about having the mics turned off. That was something that Democrats afterwards, after the debate with Biden, had regretted because they had felt like audiences couldn't hear Trump cutting in and saying things during Biden's points that he was talking. So it will be an interesting dynamic to see how these rules impact Harris's performance. But I think Democrats are, as you said, lowering expectations and concerned about what the rules will mean for them.
Yeah, point on that last debate. In fact, it made him look more restrained than he otherwise normally would from past debates, as we've seen. So tell me which candidate you think has the most to lose if the debate does not go their way.
Well, Trump benefited from the debate last time. He knocked his opponent out. But this time, I've seen him speak at campaign rallies. He misses running against Biden, it seems. He talks about Biden a lot. And I'm interested to see how much he brings up someone he's not running against in this debate. And something I'm also interested in is how much Harris talks about Project 2025. It's something that Trump has said he has had no affiliation with, but I was just out on the trail this week with his VP candidate, J.D. Vance, and Vance stopped at a campaign office in Phoenix and was talking with supporters. And one of the volunteers told him, it's something we're hearing a lot from voters. Is there something we can do to combat that message? So I'm interested to see how much Harris brings that up.
Yeah, I think you and me both and a lot of other people. Let me take you back to what you said, though, about Donald Trump having knocked out Joe Biden. Was it as much that as Joe Biden, unfortunately, with the performance he did, basically taking himself out of the game?
It was interesting. You said that when the mics were muted, it seemed like Trump was more restrained. But we didn't see as many personal attacks from Trump as we have seen in past debates from him. And I don't know what this debate will bring in terms of how much he brings that out. He has said he will continue to personally attack Harris, even when he did a podcast recently with Lex Fridman, and Fridman said to him, shouldn't you be focused more on policy? He said, I feel like I should still be attacking Harris, and I'm going to relent. So I think that it advantaged him that Biden did as poorly as he did in that debate, but also his either seeming restraint or he restrained himself worked.
Well, it did. And if he restrained himself, if that was a cognizant thought of him, I think it's because he just let it all play. He did not need to jump in that manner. I think there's a very strong school of thought of that. Let me ask about early voting. As you know, it begins just over a week in some states. Your new report highlights where independent and third-party candidates will be on the ballot. How many of these candidates will be in swing state ballots, and how might that shape the election?
Well, we recently reported that RFK Jr. is trying to take himself off the ballot in battleground states, but now also red states. He is telling his supporters, don't vote for me, vote for Trump. So that is something that Trump sees as a good point for him. He's had some luck in that regard because he now sees that some of RFK's supporters will go towards him. I'm not certain that that will have as major of an impact yet. I, early on in RFK's campaign, went to rallies and talked with voters. And a lot of what I heard from voters were people who were not satisfied with either Biden or Trump. They wanted someone different. And when Kennedy spoke at these events before he endorsed Trump, obviously, he spoke a lot about how both candidates have not kept their campaign promises, and he attacked Trump a lot on that regard. So I've heard from voters at his events who said that they are not committed to voting for Trump yet, ever since Kennedy's endorsement. So I don't know that that will necessarily hurt Harris as much as Trump aides are hoping. And then on the other fronts, Jill Stein and Cornel West, they have messaged to progressives that the Biden and Harris administration have not done enough on Gaza, which has appealed to voters in especially in Michigan. So that's one place where we've been watching closely to see will they get on the ballot. Cornel West has been in legal issue, has had some legal issues there, but he will be getting on the ballot.
Absolutely. Okay, Meryl, thank you so much for that. And